TV here with another Path of Exile video. In this one, I will fully explain how conversion works so that you can understand how it actually operates. And this is very important when it comes to minions and understanding how minions works in terms of conversion and what actually is happening when you're converting damage. And a lot of people seem to misunderstand this mechanic, so I will simply explain it to you guys. So when you have conversion from different sources, some of them behaves differently than others. So one of the most classic conversion things is obviously skill points in the tree, but I'm going to refer to Rimsorrow gloves, which you can see here on the screen. So Rimsorrow has a 50% conversion of physical into cold damage. So what this means, if you're using an ability that converts, that it deals physical damage, 50% of that physical damage is then converted into cold damage, right? So that's fine. 50% of the physical damage will then be converted to cold. That's perfectly fine, right? However, conversion works in a system of order, if you will, because the original damage is kind of replaced with the converted damage. So if you have 100% physical damage and you have 50% converted to cold, and you have increasements to your physical damage portion, that will actually apply. So all of that physical damage that you have is going to be increased, and then it will be converted. So let's say that you have 100% conversion from physical to cold. If you take minions, for example, such as Syndicate Operatives, who deals 100% physical damage, and you're using the glove Triad Grip with 4 green sockets, which is kind of the meta of Spectre's builds right now, you will convert 100% of their damage into cold. Now, what then happens is that if you have increased physical damage modifiers to them, or if you're doing it for your own abilities, all of that will scale the physical damage, which is then converted to cold. And if you then have things like, say, Hatred that scales cold damage, which also has a physical damage as extra cold damage modifier, that will do 2 things. So this is what we refer to in the minion community as double dipping. Because what happens is that Hatred has 2 modifiers. We're going to start with the first one, and that is a % of the physical damage is added as extra cold damage. Since the minions, in this case, are doing 100% physical damage originally, the Hatred will take a % of that physical damage and add as extra cold. Then, Hatred is scaling with a % more multiplicative calculated damage of cold damage increasement to them as well. This means that the physical damage gained as extra cold is applied. All of the damage is converted from physical into cold, on top of this extra fist as extra cold damage modifier, and all of that is getting affected by the more cold damage multiplier from the Hatred. This is one of the many reasons why cold damage is so good for most minion builds. Now, the part where this becomes tricky is when you're converting multiple things. So we're going to go back to non-minion builds where, say you're using the Rimsorrow gloves, and you're converting 50% of your cold damage to, your physical damage to cold damage. And say you have another modifier saying that you're converting physical into lightning, such as the Fist to Lightning support gem. Now, in this case, it is a bit different because the physical damage still applies, and everything you scale on physical damage will still scale that. And once that is scaled, it will then look at conversion, and it will take 50% of that into lightning and 50% of that into cold. And therefore, you're doing half of your damage is cold, and half of it is lightning damage, right? And that's how it works. Some things to keep in mind is things like Avatar Fire. Avatar Fire is not very good to use because what it does is converting 50% of fizz into lightning. 50% of your physical lightning and cold into fire, but it also says that you cannot deal anything but fire damage. This includes poison damage, chaos damage, fizz, cold, or lightning. All of that gets zeroed out. But if you still scale your physical damage and you're converting that to fire, that scaling still applies and is then converted. You still scale from that, but you can't deal any damage. So the end result will still only be whatever the fire damage landed on for you to deal with. So that's why you don't want to use things like the Series Promise. You don't want to have any other sorts of scaling except for fire if you're using Avatar Fire, as an example. So the tricky part with conversion is when this is not the case and you're over-converting too much of your damage into certain elements. A prime example of this would be if you're using the minion, say, Primal Crush Claws, for example, which used to be the minion we used before they fixed the Syndicate Operatives, as an example. Now, the Primal Crush Claws has a 2 different abilities, but we're going to focus on their normal attack swings. and the normal attack swings from the Primal Crush class has 75% of their physical damage converted to cold inherently. This means that every attack they do has a conversion of 75% of their damage converted to cold. This is similar to other abilities such as Wave of Conviction, where the gem itself has a conversion of 25% physical damage to fire and 25% of physical damage converted to lightning. These conversions cannot be bypassed, and they will always be there, because the conversion rate that you're in the order that they're doing is that the first check is, are you converting physical to lightning? And if the answer is yes, then it will do that first, and then it will convert physical to cold, and then lightning to cold, and then cold to fire, and then fire to chaos. That's basically the order of conversion. And the reason they have it like this is so that we cannot create an infinite loop of conversion to do infinite amounts of damage. That is why this order is in the place. However, when minions have an inherited direct conversion, such as the Primal Crush class, which does one of the abilities 50% and the other is 75% of their physical damage converted to cold, you can never go away from that being 75% or 50%. Same goes for Wave of Conviction. So to stick to Wave of Conviction, which I'm assuming most of you people are familiar with, the conversion inside the gem is prioritized. So this means that no matter how much conversion you are doing, you're always converting 25% of your physical damage to fire, and 25 will always be converted to lightning. The remaining 50% physical damage from Wave of Conviction can be converted. So if you have 50% converted to fire, then Wave of Conviction's remaining 50% will then be converted to fire. However, if you have 100% conversion to fire and you're using Wave of Conviction, no matter what you do, 25% of Wave of Conviction will remain lightning damage because of how it works. And this is because the ability of minions, as well as the ability of skill gems themselves, will always take priority and will never be able to be layered or stacked, if you will. Because if you have 100% conversion to fire and 100% conversion to cold, you will convert 50-50. 50% will be fire and 50% will be cold in that scenario. That does not work on abilities that has an inherited conversion. And there's quite a few different abilities that has this type of conversion. Another example would be Burning Arrow is a great example. Burning Arrow, for example, has a modifier that says 100% of physical damage is converted to fire, which means that no matter what you do with Burning Arrow, it will always convert all of its damage into fire. So you cannot do Burning Arrow with another conversion because the gem itself has the conversion. And once you understand how this works and what you can do with this, it's very easy to start scaling some pretty absurd damage numbers. And this is mostly effective when it comes to minions in the current meta. But back in a couple of years ago, we used to have a meta in the game where people used stat sticks, if you will, which basically was just weapons that was there to give you physical as extra X elemental damage and conversion. And people would just stack a lot of scaling of these damage sources to do a lot of extra damage when it comes to converting damage. I will add a little small note to this, and that is Elemental Equilibrium. Now, Elemental Equilibrium is a little bit tricky, but I will explain this real quickly when it comes to conversion, because the text on Elemental Equilibrium says that enemies you hit with elemental damage temporarily gets plus 25% resistance to those elements it is hit with, but minus 50% to other elements. Obviously, Chaos is not an element, so that doesn't apply. We're talking about Fire, Cold, and Lightning. Now, Fire, Cold, and Lightning, if you do a hit, which is required, whatever elemental damages you do with that one hit will apply the Elemental Equilibrium increase resistances, and any elemental damage that you did not hit the enemy with in that specific one hit scenario will get minus 50% resistances to those elements. This means that if you hit an enemy with fire damage and nothing else, the enemy gets plus 25% fire rest, minus 50 to lightning and cold. If that one hit that you're doing is doing fire and lightning damage, the enemy will get plus 25% resistance to fire and lightning, but minus 50% cold. This is why it's very important for builds that utilizes Elemental Equilibrium, such as the Cold Dot Vortex build, for example, minion builds in many cases, that it is very important that the Elemental Equilibrium trigger ability that you're using does not have any other elemental damage but the one you want to increase the resistances on the enemy with, so that you can get minus on the one you're doing the most damage with. I hope this little short description helped you understand how conversion works. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments below. And if you like these type of quick mechanical videos, let me know, and I'll try to make more in the coming days as well. So till next time, boys, hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Stay safe, keep rocking.